I was forced to share everything with my brother. Now my parents can't believe I won't share my success. Growing up, I never truly understood the concept of possession. Not because I was careless, not because I was particularly generous, but because I was never allowed to have anything to myself. From the moment I could walk, talk, and comprehend the world around me, one unshakable rule governed my life. Everything belonged to both of us. By both of us, of course, I mean me and my brother, Daniel, the sun around which my parents' universe revolved, the golden child whose wants always outweighed my needs. It didn't matter that I was the older sibling. It didn't matter that I was the one who earned things, who cherished them, who took care of them. Nothing was truly mine. If I got a new toy for my birthday, my parents would snatch it from my hands and place it in Daniel's lap before I even had the chance to appreciate it. "You have to share," they'd say with that condescending smile, as if fairness had anything to do with it. But it was never him who had to share. He never had to fight to keep his belongings, never had to watch as his special moments were diluted, reduced to something impersonal, something split down the middle so that he could have his undeserved peace. When I get some gifts, half of it were unwrapped by Daniel before I could even touch them. My first bike? Daniel got to ride it before I did, crashing it into a fence because he was too young to handle it, leaving me with scraped knees and a broken gift. My graduation party? Oh, we couldn't just celebrate my achievement alone. Daniel had made it through another year of school, and wasn't that just as important? Every milestone, every hard-earned victory, every fleeting joy was devoured by the insatiable expectation that I existed, not as an individual, but as Daniel's perpetual benefactor. If I ever dared to resent it, if I so much as hesitated when told to surrender my things, I was met with disapproving sighs and knowing glances. "Don't be so selfish," my mother would chide. "You're older. You should be happy to share." Happy. That was the word that stuck with me the most. As if it was supposed to bring me joy to watch my life be siphoned away piece by piece. As if my worth was directly tied to how much I could give to someone who never even had to ask. But the thing about conditioning is that, eventually, it becomes habit. And habit, it can be broken. And I broke it the moment I left. The day I moved out was the day I truly breathed. I worked. I hustled. I bled for my success in ways Daniel never had to. I pushed through sleepless nights, sacrificed comfort, ground myself into dust, because I wanted a life that belonged to me, and only me. There were no handouts, no shortcuts, no favors whispered into the ears of powerful people. Everything I built, I earned, and for a while I thought that meant I was finally free. But then, like ghosts emerging from the past, my parents reappeared, knocking at my door with expectations dressed as affection. It started subtly. At first, they were just proud of me. So proud, though they had never bothered to say it before. They gushed over my success in a way they never had when I was struggling to get there. My big house, my thriving business, my financial stability. I could feel it brewing beneath the surface, the familiar pattern of entitlement, the tightening of a noose I had spent years untying. Then came the requests. "Your brother is going through a rough time," my father started one evening over the phone. "It's been really hard for him lately. You know how the economy is. You wouldn't mind helping him out, would you?" Helping him out. Helping him. I should have seen it coming. But a small part of me, the foolish, conditioned part that still ached for their approval, had hoped they wouldn't dare. "Help him out how?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Well," my mother interjected, her tone light, airy, as if she wasn't asking for a freaking sacrifice. "He just needs a little push. You have that company now, don't you? Maybe you could bring him on board. Give him a position? He's really been struggling to find work." I almost laughed. Daniel? Work for me? The same Daniel who had never lifted a finger, never struggled, never put in an ounce of effort. The same Daniel who had spent his entire life coasting on things that weren't his, things that had been handed to him, or worse, taken from me. "Absolutely not," I said, my voice colder than I had intended. There was a pause. Then my mother let out an incredulous little laugh, as if I had just said something completely unreasonable. "What do you mean, no?" she asked. genuine confusion coloring her voice. "He's your brother, and—" I leaned back in my chair, fingers tightening around my phone. That means I'm required to give him a job? To fund his life? To share my success the same way I was forced to share everything else? The shift in her tone was instantaneous. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed. "It's not like you'd be losing anything. You're doing so well. What's the harm in helping your own family?" That word again. Family. Family, when it suited them. Family, when it was a weapon used to pry open my hard-earned vault of security. Funny, I mused, keeping my tone even. I don't remember him ever sharing anything with me. I don't remember you ever making him. That's different, my father cut in sharply. You were the older sibling. You had a responsibility. Ah, there it was. The same justification they had always used. The unspoken rule that my existence had always been in service to his. But I don't have that responsibility anymore, I said calmly. And I never will again. Silence. I could practically feel their disbelief, their barely contained rage, the way their carefully constructed reality was crumbling before them. In their minds, I had never been meant to escape this. I was supposed to obey, just like I always had. "You don't mean that," my mother said finally, her voice tight. I exhaled slowly, feeling the last vestiges of guilt melt away. "I do. And they couldn't do a damn thing about it. I thought that would be the end of it, that once they realized I wouldn't budge, they would slink away, forced to confront their own failures. But I underestimated their desperation. It was Grandma Elise who told me the truth. She called a week later, her voice quiet, heavy. "You always wondered why they treated you the way they did, didn't you?" she murmured. I stiffened. "What are you talking about?" She sighed. "Daniel's not your full brother." The world around me blurred. "Your mother had an affair," she continued, voice thick with something that might have been pity. "Your father found out, but instead of leaving, he forgave her, on one condition, that they pretend it never happened, that they compensate by giving Daniel everything. He never wanted you to feel like the real child, because to him, you were just a painful reminder." The revelation sat heavy in my chest, like a stone sinking into the depths of a dark ocean, dragging down every remaining shred of illusion I had clung to. I had spent my entire life wondering why nothing I did was ever enough, why my sacrifices were expected, but never acknowledged, why Daniel was the chosen one while I was merely the afterthought. And now, the answer lay bare before me, so simple, so obvious in hindsight, that I almost laughed. I was a reminder, a living, breathing consequence of my mother's betrayal, a wound my father could never truly let heal. No matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, he could never allow me to outshine the child he actually wanted. And my mother? Her guilt had taken a different form. She had overcompensated, drowning Daniel in affection and indulgence, ensuring that he was never denied, never left wanting, because in doing so, she could pretend he wasn't the product of her mistake. They never wanted balance. They wanted to rewrite history, and I was collateral damage. As I sat there, the weight of the truth pressing down on me, my phone buzzed against the table. I glanced at the screen. Mom. Of course. I stared at it for a long moment, debating whether I even wanted to hear her voice. But something inside me, that dark curiosity that had always lurked beneath the surface, made me pick up. "Hello?" My voice was steady, colder than it had ever been with her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked immediately, skipping the pretense of a greeting. There was no warmth in her tone, only exasperation, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum rather than an adult enforcing boundaries. I leaned back in my chair, pressing my free hand against my temple. "Doing what, exactly?" "You know what?" she snapped. "This selfish act of yours, this ridiculous refusal to help your own brother. We raised you to be better than this." "Better?" A short, humorless laugh escaped me. "You didn't raise me to be better," I said. "You raised me to be a doormat." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "How can you say that?" she demanded, her voice laced with that familiar tone of wounded indignation, the same voice she used whenever she wanted to play the victim. Easily, I thought. Tell me something, Mom, I said instead. If I had been the one who needed help growing up, if I had been the one who failed over and over, never put in the work, never deserved the things I was given, would you have fought this hard for me? Silence. A long, heavy silence that told me everything I already knew. You were always independent, she said finally, a weak attempt at justification. You didn't need as much as Daniel did. Because I wasn't allowed to need, I corrected her. Because if I had dared to ask for anything, you would have called me selfish. She sighed heavily. We just wanted you two to get along. No, I countered. You wanted me to be obedient. Her voice turned sharp again. That's not fair. I exhaled, my patience wearing thin. Then let me be very clear. I will not give Daniel a job. I will not support him financially. And I will not pretend that you weren't complicit in treating me as a second-class citizen in my own family. This isn't revenge, Mom. It's just me finally saying no. Her voice rose. Do you have any idea how ungrateful you sound? Ungrateful. The words slammed into me like a blade, sharp and familiar, one they had wielded against me my entire life. But this time, it didn't cut the way they wanted it to. This time, it only made me feel stronger. You're right, I said, my voice eerily calm. I am ungrateful. Another silence, and then her voice shaking with disbelief. I don't even know who you are anymore. I smiled. That makes two of us. And I hung up. My refusal, predictably, was not accepted gracefully. The next few days were a blur of missed calls, ignored texts, and messages dripping with manipulation. My father tried the logical approach, attempting to convince me that helping Daniel was an investment in family unity. My mother, on the other hand, oscillated between guilt-tripping and outright insults, claiming I was acting like a spoiled brat who had forgotten where I came from. Daniel? He was silent, not because he had suddenly grown a sense of dignity, but because he was waiting for my parents to do what they had always done, fix his problems for him. When they failed, he came to me himself. It was unannounced, of course. He just showed up at my office, as if he had the right to invade my space. My assistant hesitated before buzzing me, clearly uncomfortable. There's a man here who says he's your brother, she said carefully. He, doesn't have an appointment. Of course he didn't. I could have turned him away, I should have. But something in me, curiosity, amusement, or maybe just the need to see him squirm, made me say, send him in. The door opened, and there he was. Daniel. He looked the same as ever. A little older, maybe, but still carrying that air of effortless entitlement, the certainty that he could waltz into my life and take whatever he wanted. You're really making me do this in person? He scoffed, shaking his head as he collapsed into the chair across from my desk. You're really something. I raised an eyebrow. Making you do what, exactly? He exhaled dramatically. Come on, don't play dumb. We both know how this works. Mom and Dad go to bat for me. You push back, then I come in and we settle this. Just tell me what you want. How much do you need me to grovel? I stared at him for a long moment, taking in the sheer audacity of him. You still think this is a game, don't you? I mused. He frowned. What are you talking about? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. You think this is negotiable, that if you say the right things, if you play your part well enough, I'll eventually fold, because that's what I've always done. His jaw tensed. And you're saying you won't? I smiled. That's exactly what I'm saying. Something flickered in his eyes then. Something like realization, a slow, creeping understanding that the world he had always known was changing. So that's it? He asked, voice quieter now. You're just cutting us off? No, I said simply. I'm just finally keeping what's mine. He exhaled sharply, pushing himself up from the chair. Fine, be a selfish bitch, but don't expect any of us to come crawling back when you realize you're alone. I tilted my head, considering him. I've been alone my whole life, I said. I think I'll be just fine. The door slammed behind Daniel, but the echo of his presence lingered, clinging to the air like the final dying breath of a storm that had long overstayed its welcome. I sat there, staring at the empty chair he had occupied just moments ago, letting the silence settle over me like a weighted blanket. Heavy, but not suffocating. It was a strange feeling, this newfound finality. A quiet, creeping certainty that the war was over, not because I had negotiated a truce, not because I had been worn down into reluctant surrender, but because I had won without needing their permission to claim victory. Daniel had expected me to break. He had come here not as a man desperate for help, but as a child still clinging to the belief that if he whined loud enough, if he played the role well enough, I would eventually fold, just like always. But he had left empty-handed, and that meant he was finally beginning to understand something he had never been forced to before. There was nothing left for him to take. The aftermath of my refusal sent ripples through the carefully constructed illusion that my parents had spent their lives maintaining. Their golden child had failed, and there was no scapegoat to pin it on. There were no more resources to siphon from me, no more emotional debts to collect, no more strings left to pull. I had cut them all, and in doing so, I had forced them to face the truth, a truth they had spent decades avoiding. Daniel had never been special. He had never been hardworking. He had never been deserving of the endless praise, the countless second chances, the unwavering devotion they had poured into him while letting me waste away in the shadows. He had never earned the pedestal they had placed him on. And now, without me propping him up, there was no one left to save him from the fall. The texts and calls slowed after that. Then they stopped altogether. Not because they had given up, not at first, but because they were finally realizing what had always been inevitable. Without me, their house of cards was collapsing. 2 months passed before I saw them again. I was at home enjoying an evening of rare, uninterrupted silence when my security system alerted me to movement at my front gate. I frowned, standing from my chair and making my way to the monitor. And there they were. Mom and Dad. I exhaled slowly, staring at their familiar figures through the screen. They looked different, older, smaller. For so many years they had towered over me, their words and expectations laws I was too afraid to break. But standing there now, behind my gate, waiting for me to grant them entry, they looked weak. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I debated ignoring them, letting them stand outside until they finally accepted that I was no longer their obedient child. But some part of me, some detached, analytical part that wanted to see the final act of this tragic little play, made me press the button to speak. "Why are you here?" My mother looked up at the camera, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk." I considered that. "About what, exactly?" My father sighed, his voice low, weary. "About the family. About everything. A few years ago, I would have rushed to the gate, thrown it open, desperate to hear what they had to say. Desperate for any scrap of acknowledgement, any sign that they had finally realized what they had done to me. But I wasn't that person anymore. I opened the gate not because I needed closure, but because I wanted to watch them realize they had already lost me. They stepped inside, their gazes sweeping over my property. I could see it in their faces, the way they were finally registering what I had built for myself. Not with their help, not with their approval, but in spite of their neglect. I led them to the sitting room, making no effort to offer them drinks or hospitality. This wasn't a family reunion. This was a reckoning. My mother was the first to speak. "Daniel is struggling," she said, her voice quieter than usual. I didn't respond. She fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable with my silence. We didn't realize how bad it was," she admitted. "He can't hold a job. He's burned through what little savings he had. He's not doing well." I tilted my head, my voice deceptively mild. "And?" My father inhaled deeply. "We were wrong," he said. That made me pause. I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "What?" He swallowed. "We were wrong," he repeated. "About how we raised you two, about how we treated you. We thought we were doing what was best, but we see now that we failed you." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "And why do you see it now?" More silence. And then finally my mother whispered, "Because we lost you." The words hung between us, fragile and raw. For years I had ached to hear those words. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, dreamed of the day they would finally acknowledge what they had done to me. And yet, sitting here now, with their regret laid bare before me, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, no sense of vindication, because it wasn't real regret. It was desperation. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that used to cater to them. They missed the child they could guilt and manipulate, the one who would have rushed to fix the mess they had created. But that child was dead. "You didn't lose me," I corrected, my voice calm. "You threw me away." My mother's breath hitched. "And now," I continued, "you're here because Daniel has finally proven you wrong. Because after all these years you're realizing that you bet on the wrong horse." My father flinched, but he didn't deny it. I shook my head. "It's too late." My mother leaned forward, eyes desperate. "Please." I stood, and just like that the conversation was over. I walked to the door and opened it, gesturing toward the exit. Leave. They stared at me, as if waiting for me to change my mind, as if this was just another game, another negotiation, another test of my resolve. But I had nothing left to give them. "Go," I said, "and don't come back." For a moment they hesitated, and then, slowly, they understood. This was it. They had come here expecting to reclaim their obedient, selfless daughter. Instead, they had found a woman who had finally freed herself from them.